Today's service is the second in a series that we began last week. In this series, we are focusing our attention on populations in our society that have no voice because they are marginalized. They've been pushed to the edges out of the mainstream. They have little to no power, significance, or status. I'm going to share the same Bible passage that we used last week, just so we're all on the same page. In the Bible, in Matthew chapter 25, there is a commonly cited parable that is often referred to as the unto the least of these passage. Here is the passage. A king says to his servants, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was homeless and you gave me a room. I was shivering and you gave me clothes. I was sick and you stopped to visit. I was in prison, and you came to me. The servants replied, what are you talking about? When did we ever see you hungry and feed you, thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we ever see you sick or in prison and come to you? And then the king will say, I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you did one of these things to someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me. Last week, we listed many of the overlooked and ignored communities of people who are marginalized in our culture: the sick, the homeless, the poor, people of color, the ostracized, the lonely, the imprisoned, the disabled, the left out, the different. And then we focused our attention more closely on children. Today, we're going to focus our attention on people who are incarcerated. This is a tough topic. Later on in the service, Morton will be speaking about her work with the prison population within our state. Now, Morgan was trained as a Prison Arts Facilitator by a rather famous instructor. His name is Kurt Toffland, and he is the founder of a magnificent program called Shakespeare Behind Bars. This program allows inmates to experience the benefits and the power of theater while they are incarcerated. In 2005, Toffland's impact was beautifully documented in a movie called Shakespeare Behind Bars. All of our video clips today are from that movie. Let's take a moment and think about the lack of power and the isolation that someone who is incarcerated experiences. Let us consider those who are in prison.
Well, thank you, Nancy, for inviting me here and for you all for making me feel welcome. I attended last week as well, and those of you who were here last week, it was a very moving service. I'm going to go off script here just for a minute. I've been wrestling with something all week since coming here last week and listening to the message. Beautiful service, the woman was talking about being a CASA, and the children being marginalized, being some of the marginalized. And it's not lost on me how complicated and really difficult it is that this week I'm speaking about representing marginalized who in some cases have been the abusers to those marginalized spoken about last week. And all week I've just been wrestling with that. And so I just wanted to share with you that that's not lost on me. And that's a hard thing, but it's also a true thing. It's part of the reality of this work. But I also believe that if we're serious about serving the least of these and the marginalized, then we need to be willing to confront the fact that there are those that we are unwilling to go to. And just because a marginalized group is less innocent than another, does that mean we don't serve them or that we don't see them as human? And my opinion, my belief is no. That the answer to that question is no. We shouldn't not serve them or see them as human. And when I read scripture, I hear a message of radical forgiveness with no exceptions. And just even the verse that Nancy read this morning, in Matthew. It doesn't say, when I was wrongfully imprisoned, you came to me, or when I was in prison for this crime or this crime, you came to me. There's no qualifications, there's no exceptions. It's when I was in prison, you came to me. So I just wanted to share that with you. before we started, but I'm Morgan. It's good to be here. And I am a Prison Arts Facilitator for the Shakespeare at Pendleton program at Pendleton Correctional Facility here in Indiana. A few months ago, Nancy attended our most recent performance there and then invited me to come here and share a little bit about my story and their story with you all, which I'm honored to do. So the program I co-facilitate is called Shakespeare at Pendleton, and it was created by a Huntington University English professor named Jack Heller back in October of 2013. At Pendleton, we meet twice a week with a group of around 15 to 20 male inmates. And I'll share with you a little bit about how our sessions typically go to kind of give you an idea, a look in. A session always begins with a check-in to see how we're doing, to take the temperature of the room, just to kind of, see how the rest of the day is going to go. And to do that, I usually ask the men to represent how they're feeling with the sound and movement of sorts, because this pushes past the literal, past the words, past the brain, and gets us thinking with our imagination and with our bodies. And it pushes spontaneity in them, which is always important for all of us to encourage in ourselves. And then we'll go straight into warming up. And I usually do warm-up games and exercises. I take from Viola Spolin and her exercises, and Augusta Valalos are my theater ancestors that I sort of stand on their shoulders to do this work. And once we're appropriately warmed up, we'll move into either an acting lesson or exercise I prepared that directly relates to what we are rehearsing. Or, depending on where we're at in the process, we'll go straight to rehearsal for the show that we're working on. And then, perhaps most importantly, we always debrief at the end. So I call the circle back together, and I call it a circle because we literally stand or sit in a circle. I call the circle back together, and I ask each man to go around and say one word that they've sort of gathered from the day. Positive, negative, doesn't matter, it has to be honest. And then we take a deep breath in together, a deep breath out, and I send them off. That's sort of how our sessions go, give you a look in there. So why theater? Why is theater a successful tool for this work? There is a quote from one of my college textbooks that I return to quite frequently. It says, "There is power in wondering what if and playing it as if." And this perspective makes drama a vehicle for life rehearsal. And from this, more courage emerges. Now, drama can be an effective way to help prisoners and ex-offenders to develop life skills and an improved sense of their own competence. Drama helps participants to explore new, non-offending futures and practice better ways to solve their problems, relate to other people, and engage with the world around them. And I have seen that to be true time and time again. So I'd like to share two examples with you this morning. Before I met Jack or knew about his program at Pendleton, I apprenticed under the Shakespeare Behind Bars creator, Kurt Toughlin, who you saw in the videos, up in a facility in Michigan where he's currently working. I was there for only 4 weeks, but those 4 weeks were life-altering. And it was the first time I'd ever been inside a prison. Definitely the first time I'd been in a circle of inmates talking about Shakespeare. And because I was graciously invited to sit in their circle, I was able to move beyond the theoretical that I'm learning in the classroom of how theater can help people. I was able to move beyond that and really experience the cathartic, real power that theater has to change lives, and that Shakespeare's plays particularly have. And I would like to share an interaction I had towards the end of my apprenticeship, actually with a guard, a security guard, that I will never forget. And here is actually an excerpt from my journal entry that day, almost 5 years ago. And I'll just read that for you. "Today, while I was waiting in the lobby to go through security, I had a conversation worth writing about. The sergeant at the front desk, who I have had many positive interactions with since coming here, called me over and asked, 'Why do you enjoy coming in here? Why do you do this?' I didn't hesitate to answer right away, and I went right into how wonderful it is to work and surround myself with people who want to be better and want to discuss things and learn. I told the man how theater is the best way to reach people, and I insisted that this work I am doing is the most important work I have ever done. At this point, he insisted to me that the men were sitting in that circle because I have a pretty face. is what he said to me. That these guys have to pass the time somehow in that circle, and so they come to groups and programs in order to do that. He told me that you couldn't change a man. A rapist will always be a rapist, a child molester will always want children, and a criminal is a criminal. Now, I appreciate his perspective, I do. I told him that I understand that he interacts with these prisoners on a whole different level than I do, and he has to see them at their worst. I get it that an officer's job isn't to hold their hands and sit in a circle asking deep questions. But what if all the staff understood that these men could maybe possibly change a little bit? I don't know if that world exists in corrections, but I know I can contribute in my own way by having conversations just like the one I had with the sergeant today. When he told me that a man couldn't change, I replied that even if that's true, even if they only show up because I am something new to look at, I don't care. I don't care because I have witnessed genuine enlightenments in little and big ways in just 4 weeks being here. If a man comes to the circle and 99% of the time he's just there to pass the time or he's there to look at a woman, what about the 1%? What about the little tug at his soul or mind that makes him that much more of a whole human at the end of the day, month, or year? I'm not sure if this sergeant understood or wanted to understand what I was saying, but I hope he did. And I hope others do when I have this conversation again, which I know I will. Humans are capable of great and evil things. I am human, you are human, they are human. It is about the story behind the act that really matters. What about the kid who was given weed at age 7 because he was his drug-addicted, paralyzed mother's only friend? No wonder he is serving time on a drug charge. We as a society rarely pause to close our mouths and let our minds or hearts communicate with one another. One of the guys today in the last circle offered up an excellent performance of a monologue from Richard II. It begins, I have been studying how I may compare this prison where I live unto the world. And for because the world is populous and here is not a creature but myself, I cannot do it. Yet, I'll hammer it out. My brain I'll prove the female to my soul the father, and these two beget a generation of still breeding thoughts, and these same thoughts people this little world, and humors like the people of this world, for no thought is contented. Today bred determination to learn this monologue and use it as a foundation in which I can communicate to others why I am here and why it is important. And here I am today, almost 5 years later, right, getting this opportunity to share with you why I go in every week and why it is so important, an opportunity for which I am so grateful. I would like to share one more story with you, this time from one of the participants in our circle at Pendleton currently. He goes by Red, a different Red than Kurt mentioned in the video, and he was a negative force when he first joined our group. He didn't seem to take the work very seriously, and there were a couple of sessions where he was directly disrespectful towards me and my leadership in the group. And in an apology letter he wrote to me once for that behavior, he shared a little of his story. It turns out that Red suffers from PTSD as a result from his time as a Marine in Beirut during 1982 and 1984. Red was in Beirut during the 1983 barracks bombings. He witnessed the suicide bomber detonate the truck, killing 220 Marines, one of whom was his best friend. In his apology letter to me, he shares why he joined our circle. He writes, I had talked to a few combat veterans on the outside who had been in Iraq and Afghanistan that upon their coming home had enrolled in acting projects through the VA and other veteran advocate groups. They recommended it out there, so when you and Jack came around this year, I decided to give it a try. I found it to be therapeutic for me for the short time I've been involved in it. Red's vulnerability and humility really took me by surprise. And he continued to show up every week, and even took on a small female role in Time of Athens that we did 2 years ago, that none of the men wanted to go near. And he really stepped it up this year when we started rehearsals for our night of monologues and scenes. His goal was to memorize and perform the entire Richard II monologue, a difficult 66-line speech with a range of emotions to work through. The first rehearsal that he did it for us, he pushed through, and he pushed past his insecurities that I could see trying to come in there and block him. But at one point he came to this angry, frustrated halt because he got tripped up. But then this beautiful thing happened. All the men around us in the circle that were watching, they started cheering and clapping and chanting his name and encouraging him. And because of their encouragement, Red was able to continue, push through, and give this great performance that many of us, we had tears in our eyes by the end of it. I asked Red to reflect on his performance later on, and these are his words. I relate to Richard's imprisonment, and at one time I too was in isolated confinement. By being in prison, you can stay in your right mind by finding what is therapeutic for you, like I have by being in Shakespeare at Pendleton. My PTSD is still with me, but is diminished because of the many benefits this program offers. Jack and I work hard to cultivate a circle that is family for these men, many of whom have no idea what that word means or what that's like. Red's story is an example of that brotherly bond, as well as the transformative power of theater can have on a man's character. So what's next for our circle? Jack and I continue to meet with the men twice a week, and we're currently rehearsing Julius Caesar, which will be much fun. On August 27th, I began a program of my own at Newcastle Correctional Facility. And we are in the infant stages there of that process. We don't even have a name yet, but that is something that I've dreamed about for a long time, is having my own program to launch. And so I'm honored and humbled to be able to get to do that. And we'll have week 3 this coming Tuesday. But I would like to end this morning with a call of action and encouragement for each of you. I want to tell you to find where you can serve best. Okay, maybe that's working with a prison population, but also maybe it's not, and that's okay. When people ask me, my family mostly, why maximum security prisons, that was hard for my dad to deal with. I don't have a clear answer. I really don't. I have never known someone personally who has gone to prison. I've never been directly impacted by an individual's crime. For me, it was a kind of calling. Truly, and use what word you would like there, but I feel a supernatural or a spiritual pull to this work. Inexplicably, I am at my sharpest, my most confident, and my most calm when I am sitting in a theater circle in a prison. Why? I don't know. I can only point away from myself and toward God. And so even if you don't know why you are interested in a certain population or cause, like how it was for me, or maybe you don't even have one in mind at all right now, that's okay. I would encourage you to listen to the Spirit, whatever that means for you, and connect. Okay, that's so important. Go out and serve alongside people who are different than you, not to make them better or to make yourself better, but to learn from one another. Go out and do. Why do our circles function so well in our programs? It's not because Jack and I walk in and say, all right, we're going to fix you. Here's how it's going to happen. Here's the right way to do this. Not at all. We go in and we sit and take a seat in the circle with them. A circle has no apex, and it has no break or gap, and that is intentional. And there is always work to be done, friends. Okay, even on the days when I watch or listen to too much news, or we've all been there where we read about all these terrible things happening, and I feel powerless, right, to be able to make any difference, any change. There is still work to be done. I move forward because that is true. We must move forward because there's still work to be done. I have been studying how I may compare this prison where I live unto the world, and because the world is populous, and here is not a creature but myself, I cannot do it. Yet, I'll hammer it out. King Richard is in solitary confinement when he delivers that speech, wondering how on earth he can compare the world out there to his prison cell. It feels impossible, pointless, a lost cause, but he says, yet. Right? My responsibility and your responsibility is to that and yet. But unlike Richard, we have the privilege and the means to hammer it out together. And I have found that it's so much more beautiful and life-giving than going at it alone. Now, I mentioned earlier that I lead a debrief at the end of circles, and I'd like to do that here as well. I feel like we're a circle of sorts here together in this room. So I want everyone to think of a word that they have gained or they have retained from this morning. Positive, negative, from my message, from the songs, whatever. Think of that word. I'll give you a few seconds. It's one word. And on the count of 3, we're all going to say our word out loud together. Okay, we're going to give it into the space, right? 1, 2, 3.
Reserved.
Thank you. And then we're going to take a deep breath in together. Deep breath out. And then this is where I always say to the men, go out there and do good, and come back to our circle safely next week. Thank you so much for letting me share with you this morning.